Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and as it happens with every new update, more players are planning on making the return to check out the new content arriving with the patch 10.2.5, which is dropping next Tuesday or Wednesday depending on your region. And as usual, I've been getting messages from some of the returning players asking me what classes are worth getting into for the rest of the Season 3. Since many of you either skipped out on Season 2 entirely or have left the game during that time period. As somebody who plays a lot of alts, I've been gearing every single class in the game over the last few weeks now, getting the chance to try all the various tier set bonuses and even talent builds, and I found plenty of playstyles that I find the most fun as of this season. So today I wanted to throw out a few recommendations by going over what I think is the most fun you can have with every single class with the upcoming 10.2.5 Dragonflight update. But right before we get into that, most of you guys watching these kind of update videos are still not subscribed. However, the more of you remind, the more of you do, so let's keep it going. Subscribe to the channel and ring the bell if you're watching these videos anyway, especially if you want to get more regular content regarding Dragonflight 10.2 or any of the future updates going forward. I want to start this list of recommendations in a reverse alphabetical order just to mix things up a bit, starting with a good old crowd favorite, the class of Warrior. When it comes to warriors, it's very difficult to not recommend Fury Warrior as one of the more fun specs to get into. The tier set of Fury Warriors does actually change your playstyle and your rotation compared to previous seasons, whereas normally you'd be spamming a lot of rage blows, instead you're spamming bloodthirst as much as possible. This does alter your overall rotation a little, where for the most part you will be focused on pressing bloodthirst and rampage as much as possible, with a handful of abilities sprinkled in between. But we'll have a much greater emphasis on using some of your major offensive cooldowns to deal quite a bit of burst damage, though even with the alterations, it's still very fast-paced, very hard-hitting, but also very easy for some of the newer players to get into for the class of Warrior. But besides Fury, I also have to give my personal recommendation of Protection Warrior, which is by no means the strongest tank spec in the game right now, but that's what really makes him stand out, as playing a Prot Warrior competitively at high-end content is actually quite challenging. And I'm someone who always enjoyed exploring some of the underdog specs or some of the lesser played specs because of the unique playstyles and even challenges that they may offer. At its core, however, Protection Warrior does have an answer for every situation in the form of specified cooldowns that have usually quite a high downtime. But finding appropriate ways to weave these cooldowns together can make Protection Warriors basically unstoppable for a short moment. Aside of that, Prot actually has a very simple rotation and a myriad of offensive cooldowns that really give you a little bit extra punch when it comes to group content. Next, for the class of Warlock, I think Destruction is an easy recommendation. Over the last few expansions, it has been one of the more fun specs of Warlock, and definitely one of the easier ones to get into, and that maintains today in the Season 3 of Dragonflight. But ever since the recently buffed up Cataclysm as well as the damage of Immolation, Destruction has become a ton more fun to play just because of the fiery explosion, which allows Destruction to maintain a fairly high impact in both single target as well as on AoE content. Demonology, however, is another spec easily worth recommending for the 10.2 ever since they got a full rework, which mostly emphasized lowering down the effectiveness and the value of the main tyrant or the pit lord summon, but putting a far more emphasis into some of your basic summons as well as your caster abilities, where now every single button you press and every demon you summon has a satisfying feel to it in raids and dungeons, where every cast starts to feel impactful with every single keystroke. Next in our list, we have the class of Shaman, and I feel like Enhancement is an easier recommendation for anybody looking to play a melee in 10.2.5. Enhancement Shaman specifically have a good mix of melee damage combined with ranged elemental damage, which makes him feel kind of like a hybrid DPS with just how much damage you can output from 40 yards away. Enhancement Shamans are fairly competitive when it comes to both burst as well as sustained damage, and they got an awesome set of party utility through a variety of totems, as well as a knockback or a knockup depending on how you talent into your Thunderstorm ability. Elemental Shaman, very similar to Enhancement, is another fun spec that I think is worth recommending. This would be my favorite choice out of the Shaman class so far. The newest tier set kind of breaks apart the rotation a little, but in a fun and a chaotic way, which puts the highest emphasis on the ability of Lava Burst and the procs of Lava Surge, which puts Lava Burst above everything else in both single target as well as AoE situations. Then we got my main, the class of Rogue, where I think all three specs of Rogue are an easier recommendation right now. In general, rogues in 10.2.5 have incredibly good crowd control with the new AoE blind, far better defenses with the double feint talent, massive sprint and mobility with feather food, and even shorter shrouds for dungeons, which is actually quite handy. As Assassination rogues, you're a master of single target damage and bleeds, but you also now got a lot better cleave and AoE damage, specifically with talents such as Caustic Spatter, allowing your poisons to splatter onto your foes. Outlaw rogues have become the John Wick of Dragonflight with how often you can blast your foes with between the eyes, and Subtlety plays around major cooldown reduction talents, which allows them for some of the biggest bursts ever imaginable. And when it comes to the class of Priest, one of the easier recommendations is going to be Discipline, which is a very strong in the current season, a very reliable healer that provides shields as well as great party defensives in order to dampen the damage your allies would take. One of the fun parts about Discipline, especially someone who plays mostly DPS classes, is that it's an offensive playstyle thanks to the Atonement mechanic. Plus, their Season 3 tier set, which makes you a lot more aggressive, allows you to fully commit on that offensive fantasy of a caster blasting your foes with holy and shadow damage while reliably healing your allies with the damage done, which is a much easier class to adjust into if you want to heal but don't really have a healing background. And for Paladins, Protection Pally is a very strong option for Season 3, and it's an incredibly fun choice if you do pick up a Paladin. While the tier set is still very much lackluster, and we've given him a lot of feedback during the PTR, where being forced to stay in your consecration and managing its uptime around your tier set is not really fun or interactive. That being said, it offers fantastic numbers when it comes to damage as well as healing. But either way, regardless of the tier set, Protection Paladin remains a very high impact tank when it comes to group and game content, with a myriad of support abilities that can help your allies get out of danger. In general, you're quite potent when it comes to tank damage. You have amazing control capabilities within dungeons and even raids, and also lots of strong defensive cooldowns, combined with some of the best passive damage reduction bonuses that can make this tank feel the sturdiest out of the bunch given in Season 3. Retribution Paladin is another recommendation for a Paladin spec to pick up for 10.2.5. Similar to Protection Paladins, they have a very similar utility toolkit that can provide your allies with a variety of benefits. And just like Protection, Retribution is also quite sturdy, with plenty of defensive options and abilities and passives to help you combat a lot of the raid and dungeon mechanics. You also have great damage output, but you can only focus on either AoE damage or single target, which is one of the biggest downsides of playing a Retribution Paladin since you can do both. But if you're fine with a specialist playstyle, then Retribution may be a suitable option. Next, we have the class of Monks, where it's easy for me to recommend the Mistweaver Monk, which is such a good healing spec currently in the Season 3 endgame content. Like I said before, I come from a DPS background where I'm mostly playing melee classes, so for me to adjust to a melee type of healer, Mistweaver Fist Weaving playstyle was the easiest one for me to get into. First of all, monks in general have very good defensives. Minus any kind of immunities, you are quite tanky, with a lot of passives and actives and big self-healing abilities in order to help bring yourself back up from the brink of death. You also have heightened mobility, which makes them perfect when it comes to avoiding enemy mechanics, and good party utility like a Mass Dispel, as well as plenty of control capabilities. However, if you just want to do damage and not heal on your monk, then Windwalker is the perfect choice for the 10.2.5. Ever since we saw the spec get buffs after buffs after buffs over a period of consecutive weeks, the spec has finally been given some air to grow into a much more competitive standing. Very similar to Mistweavers, Windwalker monks are very mobile, have great defensives, fantastic utility with a bunch of control abilities like Ring of Peace, which is underrated in Mythic Plus content, but also Windwalker's Cleave Touch of Death playstyle is insanely fun to pull off, and really makes the spec feel kind of overpowered in very specific situations. Up next on the list is the class of Mage, where I think all three Mage specs are an easy recommendation. Generally, all three specs of mages share a very strong, potent set of crowd control abilities that are great in dungeon content. Plenty of survivability options, plenty of good mobility, and even group utility with the multiple shields that you can apply to your party members. Some of you might prefer the setup playstyles like the Arcane Mage, which focus on exerting the most amount of damage after taking some time to power themselves up. Or maybe Frost Mages for their enhanced cleave-focused output, bursty glacial spikes, as well as a natural affinity to slow enemy targets from all of the frost spells and abilities. Or maybe you'll prefer the fast-paced Fire Mages, which are focused on spamming out as many explosive pyroblasts or flame strikes as possible. Then we have the class of Hunter, where Beastmastery remains to be one of the more solid recommendations. A playstyle that's perfect for some of the newer players, or those of you that favor some of the more simpler rotations, but still want to remain a highly effective member of your party. Which probably makes this spec the most approachable one out of every other recommendation that we've had so far in today's video. Combined with the instacast playstyle that allows you to stay on the move while executing your rotation flawlessly, together with great AoE and single target, Beastmastery has everything that you would desire from a class of Hunter. However, besides Beast Mastery, I personally would also want to recommend Survival as a potential choice going forward. While Survival has generally been an oddball spec amongst Hunters as an unusual melee option for a class that's primarily ranged, their newest tier set is focused around big crit damage following a Fury of the Eagle, which fits perfectly with the class that's all about big grenades and explosions. Survival Hunters also have a lot of ranged abilities for a melee class, which allows them to run circles around bosses and enemies in dungeons while dodging most encounter mechanics without losing too much uptime, which gives them that flexibility that no melee really has in the game. Up next is the class of the Evoker, where augmentation still remains to be one of the best recommended options. For one, the spec's rotation is pretty easy to get into for some of the newer or even returning players checking out Evoker for the first time. It has a very unique group buff oriented playstyle, whether trying to buff your allies' damage or increasing your group's overall survivability. Though another spec of Evoker, one that doesn't get nearly as much recognition, is Preservation, and I really wanted to highlight them for this video since they're still a very fun healing spec that's worth recommending. Mostly because of their unique combo healing playstyle of Echo, the primary mechanic that really separates Evoker from every other healer, which allows them to copy the effectiveness either partially or fully, using the ability of Echo to apply multiple single target buffs or healing effects to multiple targets. And there's so many different combinations of effects that can be achieved with the way that you use Echo, as well as other empowerments as well as basic abilities. Plus, I've always been a big fan of some of the bronze, timey-wimey magic that Preservation gets to play with, whether you try to literally reverse allies' damage taken, or combine some of those bronze abilities with the Echo effect, or how you can store a bunch of different abilities in charges and then unleash them all at once. Next, for the class of Druids, I think all 4 specs are an easy recommendation, since I've always found Druids as an entire class quite enjoyable. Whether it is as a bear druid, especially during season 2, or the recent restoration druid tree summoner playstyle, but also always found the bleeds of the feral and the dots and the star surges of a balanced druids quite enjoyable, all depending on how I'm feeling that day. And the best part is the druid's entire kit of Innervate, Ursol's, Incapacitation Roar, Typhoon, and all the other utilities that bring to raids and dungeons are all shared amongst all of these specs, so you have more freedom in the spec you want to play while still bringing the entire class kit in general. Up next we have the class of Demon Hunter, where I think both specs, the Vengeance and the Heavy Demon Hunter, are very much a recommend for the 10.2.5. Heavy Demon Hunters have a ton of burst damage ever since the most recent rework, plenty of mobility, and fantastic control that is much sought after in M+ content. Movement, however, will still be part of your damage rotation in a way, as part of the Heavy Demon Hunter playstyle. But now you have a choice between Momentum, which allows you to build up a smaller damage buff that can last for a while, or Inertia that allows you to unleash the most amount of damage within 5 seconds. So if you don't really mind having to move around as part of your damage rotation for Demon Hunter, then Havoc remains a very solid choice. And then for the spec of Vengeance, it still remains one of those highly interactive tanks that doesn't have too many defensive cooldowns for you to utilize, but rather a lot of active mitigational abilities in order to soften up a lot of the blows that you take. Plus, the Vengeance double sigil playstyle is a ton of fun and offers a ton of control with all of your sigils within dungeons specifically. And being able to rotate sigils that silence your foes, strike them with fear, chain them together just to Chaos Nova stun everybody at once is one of the most empowering feelings that you can have as a tank. Finally, for the class of Death Knight, one of the easier ones to recommend would be the spec of Unholy, which has been changed for the patch 10.2 from a spec that's all about the 3-minute summons of your undead horde, changed to be more of a sustained spec, where a lot of your short-term cooldowns, such as the ghouls summoned by Apocalypse, the main pet, especially within Transformation, as well as the Unholy Frenzy, have not gotten a little stronger, but some of those 3-minute cooldowns got a little bit weaker. This allows for you to have much better damage in between your massive army of undead summons while maintaining high single target damage within raid encounters. Then I also want to put up my personal favorite, which is the Frosty Death Knight, which I think is still worth recommending on this list. At first I didn't really think I was gonna enjoy the newest tier set for Season 3, but using the ability of Chill Streak as a snowball bounces between you and the enemy target, building up damage, granting you resources, it actually plays rather nicely with the Frost playstyle. It's great for resource generation if you prefer to play the Breath as in Dragosa build, which is very resource intensive but towards Death Knights that can maintain the Icy channel. That same Chill Streak though, that applies a damage debuff to the enemy target, also combines well together with an Obliteration playstyle, where you're trying to get some of the biggest, chunkiest crits on the enemy target every single minute. With a short cooldown of Chill Streak, it does let you line it up with every single one of those bursty windows. As always, I want to thank all of you so much for watching this video, and I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what class are you looking to play for the patch 10.2.5. As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.